So what if we had a fraction like 1/4, and we're adding to that a second fraction also called a fourth, or also shown as a fourth? How do we add it together? Well, first thing we check is see, are the denominators the same? And they are. So we just keep that denominator along for the ride. And then we add 1 plus 1. And I'll just put that up there to remind you we're adding it together. And so what you'll get is 2/4. Now 2/4 is the correct answer. It is the addition of these two fractions. But if you remember back from previous lessons, we had talked about the fact that we have to check to make sure everything's simplified. Now in this case, we can simplify this fraction further because we notice that we can divide the top by 2 and the bottom by 2. Remember, when simplifying fractions, and we've talked about this a great deal in previous lessons, you can divide the top and the bottom by anything you like as long as you do it to the top and the bottom. And when you do it to both top and bottom, you haven't really changed what the fraction is or what it represents. You're just changing the way it looks on the board. But it represents the same amount of stuff. So what we have here is, since we have 2/4 as the answer, we can divide the top by 2. We can also divide the bottom by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the answer to this is 1/2. That's what you would circle on your paper. The fraction 2/4 is exactly the same as 1/2. So this is correct also, but usually when you circle things on your exam or your test, you want to simplify into lowest terms. Now again, we're not going to do this for every problem, but I want to show you graphically what's happening here, just so since we're getting our feet wet. The fraction 1/4 looks like this. We cut a pizza into 4 pieces, and we are only interested in one piece here because it's 1 out of 4 pieces. That's what that represents. And we're adding to it this 1/4, which is really the same exact thing. So here's another pizza. We divide it up into 4 pieces, and let's call this pizza this one piece over here for this 1/4. All right, now when we add these together, it's still going to be in terms of 4 pieces because the denominator is a 4. But here we've added this one to this one. So what do we have? We have, and I'll switch colors, we have this piece from the first pizza, and we have this piece from the second pizza. Now let me ask you this, what fraction does this represent? This fraction is 2 pieces out of 4 pieces altogether, 2/4. Notice that's what we got up here. The answer was 2/4. So we could stop there, but usually what we want to do is simplify the fraction, make it simpler, try to simplify everything we can. And we're saying that through this whole process here, it's the same thing as 1/2. And I think you'd all agree that this fraction is indeed half the pizza. And if you really wanted to draw that, here's the pizza. If you draw a line right here and just shade the whole top half, because that's what we have here, the whole top half shaded, this is 1 out of 2 pieces, which is 1/2. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, sometimes you add fractions and you get an answer that is totally correct, but you can simplify it into a simpler looking fraction. This fraction and this fraction represent the same amount of pizza. I mean, if somebody asks you, hey, do you want half a pizza or do you want 2/4 of a pizza? Well, there's no right answer because it's exactly the same amount of pizza. When you look at how much is shaded, it's the same thing. But always when we add fractions, we want to simplify the answer. So that's what we're going to be doing in all of these problems. So what if we have 1/2 plus 1/2? We check to see if the denominators are the same, and they are, so we keep it, that's 2, and then we add 1 plus 1. And we get 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Now we then look and see, can we simplify this fraction? And before you start getting into simplifying the fraction, you also need to remember something we studied in previous lesson. The concept of a fraction is also represented as division. You can think of this fraction as 2 divided by 2. And so anytime you have the same number on top and the same number on the bottom, it's always going to be 1. So the answer to this is 1. Let me ask, do you think that makes sense? If I have half of a pizza and I add to it another half of a pizza, I should have 1 whole pizza, and that's what I get in the end. So when you do it correctly and you simplify it correctly, it should all make sense. All right, the next question, what if I have 1/6 plus 3/6? Well, I check and see, are the denominators the same? And they are, so I keep it. 1 plus 3 is what I'm doing here. 1 plus 3 is, of course, 4, so the answer is 4/6. Now that's correct and all, but I usually want to try to simplify it, so I rewrite 4/6, and I ask myself, Can I divide top and bottom by something? And then yes, of course, I can divide the top and bottom by 2. That will divide evenly. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the answer is 2/3. Again, the correct answer is also represented by 4/6, but by simplifying it, 2/3 represents the same thing, but is looking simpler. All right, now let's look at the question 3/8 plus 1/8. Are the denominators the same? Yes, they are. So I keep it. That's an 8. 3 and 1 is going to give you 3 plus 1, which is 4/8. 4/8. Question, is that simplified? Well, you have to ask yourself, can I divide top and bottom by something? Well, I can divide the top by 4, and I can also divide the bottom by 4, because I can see that 4 will divide evenly into both of these guys. And so what you get is 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2, so the answer is 1/2. That should make sense to you. When you add the fractions, we got 4/8. Would you prefer 4/8 of a pizza or 4 out of 8 slices? Or would you prefer 1/2 of a pizza? It's the same exact thing. 1/2 is the same as 4/8 because of the way fractions work with simplification. All right. Now what if we have 3/10 plus 5/10? We check and see if the denominators are the same, and they are, so we keep the denominator of 10, and then we add the numerators, 3 plus 5. All right, and that's going to give me on the top 8/10. Next, we check and see, is this fully simplified? Well, they're both even numbers, so we know we can simplify by at least dividing by 2. So let me divide this guy by 2, and if I do it to the top, I also have to do it to the bottom. And so what I'm going to end up getting is 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. The answer is 4/5. Now, it's probably not quite so obvious that 4/5 is exactly the same thing as 8/10, but it's exactly true. If I asked you, hey, would you prefer 8/10 of a pizza, or would you prefer 4/5 of a pizza? Your answer is, I don't care, because they're exactly the same thing. And we get there by dividing the top and the bottom by 2, changing the numbers of the fraction, but the fraction still represents the same thing. All right, last problem. We're going to have 2/15 plus 3/15. So since the denominators are the same, we keep them. That's going to be 15. The tops, we say 2 plus 3. All right, and now that we have this in place, 2 plus 3 is 5/15. All right, so we could circle that as our answer, but then we always have to check, can we take top and bottom and divide it by something evenly into top and bottom? Well, we notice they both end in 5, so we can divide the top by 5, and if we do it to the top, we also have to do it to the bottom. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. 15 divided by 5, you should know, is 3, so that's 1/3. Again, 1/3 and 5/15 represent exactly the same thing.